The Nintendo Switch 2 gets more exciting with this big update from Square Enix, and we take a look at some of the better Nintendo Switch 2 ports and what we could see in the future from third-party developers. But let's go ahead and start off with Square Enix. Stealth put out this great tweet talking about Square Enix and what they're doing on the Nintendo Switch 2, and it's something that I've talked about quite a bit before. They are banking, they are going all in on the multi-platform, but also all in on the Nintendo Switch 2 with an unprecedented amount of support, at least at the beginning of the system's life, that we've ever seen for any Nintendo system from Square Enix. Now, Square Enix has usually supported Nintendo platforms. There was a little bit of a dry spell, probably in the GameCube and Wii era, but when it comes to portable systems, Square Enix has always been there. And more recently, with the Nintendo Switch 1, and now with the Nintendo Switch 2, we've got it with their hybrid system. They have been supporting it quite a bit, but when it comes to the launch of a system, Square Enix usually is nowhere to be found on Nintendo platforms in the last 20 years, but the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2 has lit a fire into Square Enix that we have never seen before, or at least anytime recently, with their support on a Nintendo platform. And I think that it's with good cause, because they're looking at the type of demographics, they're looking at what is going on in Japan and worldwide, and they are seeing, I wouldn't say the shrinking of the market, but I would see a shift of the market, especially in Japan, where that shift is already transitioned 100% completely. The Nintendo Switch 2 will be the dominant system for the upcoming generation right now at this point, and going forward in the future overall, because no system is even selling close to it. And of course, the Nintendo Switch 1 is the best selling system of all time in Japan, and still selling better than Xbox and PlayStation. So Nintendo essentially has almost an NES level stranglehold in Japan on the market, and Square Enix is coming out strong here, which Stealth has detailed a bit. We're going to talk about that and what's going on and what could happen in the future, in addition to some other things as well, because I think this is an exciting time for RPG fans and of course for Square Enix fans who want to be able to play their games anywhere that they want. So Square Enix has updated their "What Square Enix games can you play on Nintendo Switch 2" article. By the way, I just want to say this, they never did that with the Nintendo Switch 1, and nowhere near within the first month or 2 months of the system, not even close when it comes down to it. So yes, that is a huge change, and obviously a big marketing push on what they want you looking at when it comes to their titles. So Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, that's coming out this fall. Final Fantasy Tactics Remaster, which got a release date for that as well. Bravely Default HD Remaster, which you can already play on your Nintendo Switch 2. Octopath Traveler 0, which is coming out this December. The Adventures of Elliot, The Millennium Tales, which is an incredible game. There's a demo right now on the Nintendo Switch 2 eShop that you can pick up. That's coming out in early 2026. Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D Remake coming out later in just a bit here. Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D Remake, that's already out. You can pick up, and there is an update for the Nintendo Switch 2 version that gets it running at 60 FPS, so you're definitely going to want to download that. Romancing Saga 2 Remake Nintendo Switch 2 Edition, which, in my opinion, if you want a beefy, great game to play that's not Final Fantasy or Bravely Default or something like that, or HD 2D, I would highly recommend Romancing Saga 2. That remake on the Nintendo Switch, now that they've got it up to 60 FPS, running at 1440p, playing that type of game with 100 plus hours of content anywhere that you want, it is incredible. I was playing it on PS5, got tired of it, because playing on the TV with an RPG like that got kind of tiring, but now that it's on the Nintendo Switch 2, I'm definitely going to pick it up after I'm done with Donkey Kong Bonanza, which I'm very close to being done with that game, so I'm going to be picking that up when it comes to the upgrade. You can get the Nintendo Switch 1 version, and you can just upgrade it from the eShop. So that is a game that I would definitely say look out for, and I'm super happy that they did that so early in the life of the Nintendo Switch 2. So Switch 2 only been out for 2 months, but Square Enix showing up very big, and it's not going to stop here, guys. We are going to see more exciting and great projects from Square Enix. We are going to see games that are spearheaded essentially by the Nintendo Switch 1, or now at this point Nintendo Switch 2 being the dominant platform that they get made, and then of course they make that multi-platform. I don't think Octopath Traveler 0, I don't think Bravely Default HD Remaster, I don't think The Adventures of Elliot, The Millennium Tales, I don't think these games even come out or even made if it wasn't for the Nintendo Switch 2. If it wasn't for that system to where they know they can get a solid base of probably about 1 million people who are going to buy the game just specifically on the Nintendo Switch 2 platform. I think that's the reason why we can see all the support, because they saw that with the Nintendo Switch 1. They saw how Octopath Traveler did, how Bravely Default 2 did, how a lot of the RPGs performed. And I can't say the numbers because, one, it would give up the source, but also two, because it's a little bit outdated. But I've seen what they sold when it comes to the classic Square Enix Final Fantasy games on the Nintendo Switch 1. And I'll just say this, they were very, very good. So Square Enix had this plan, they put it in motion once the Nintendo Switch started blowing up and they started releasing some of their old games and it did so well. They put it in motion, they put a plan together to make sure that when the Nintendo Switch 2 was coming out, they were going to be ready with games. And absolutely, they were one of the first developers when it comes to third party that knew about the Nintendo Switch 2 and got dev kits, because this support is really good. And having a game like Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate is so important. It's actually one of the most important games when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2 in its first calendar year, because that is a mainline, newer-ish Final Fantasy game. And we already kind of had it leaked that Final Fantasy Rebirth is going to be coming over to Nintendo Switch 2 as well. So these are games that Nintendo platforms have not gotten in decades at this point. The last time that you can sit there and say really that they're getting newer Final Fantasy games, big mainline ones, anytime in the near stratosphere is when they come out on a PlayStation platform or when they come out on another platform, was back when it was actually exclusive with Final Fantasy VI. That was the last time. When it comes to the N64, nothing. The GameCube, nothing. The Wii, nothing. The Wii U, nothing. The Switch 1, nothing. Now, did we get classic games like classic Final Fantasy brought back? Yes, but those were older games from previous systems. We're talking about new, current Final Fantasy within the last year or so coming out on the Nintendo platform. That's a big game. That is going to be huge for how Square Enix sees the Nintendo Switch 2, and I am guessing that they are going to do well, especially with the Nintendo Switch 2 taking over Japan as it is, kind of dominating at this point. So this is what I love to see. This is what I predicted that I would see with the Nintendo Switch 2 compared to Switch 1, as there were a number of people saying, where is the Square Enix support with the Nintendo Switch 1 in the first year or so? It took them some time. I don't think they felt that the Nintendo Switch 1 was going to be a massive success like it was, so all they really had was Octopath Traveler overall. But once they saw that, it took off, and they have hit the ground running already on the Nintendo Switch 2. Expect a lot of other Japanese developers to be doing the same thing, although we do have some that are kind of not quite on board with everything, but they're getting there. Bandai Namco is one of those developers who got Dragon Ball Sparking Zero finally making its way over to Nintendo Switch 2 and Switch 1 later this year. So I do think that we're going to see a lot more of this from other Japanese developers. Falcom is pretty much already there with all their Legend of Heroes games and stuff like that. So we're going to see day and date. We're going to see their games coming over. And you should see that more with Sega. You should see it more with Capcom as they kind of get antiquated with the hardware. As they kind of see that they're going to have to make sure that they put stuff when it comes to Switch 2, because some of their games maybe aren't doing as well as maybe they would have liked, like with Monster Hunter Wilds, for example. So I see a lot more Japanese developers kind of going in this path sooner than later, especially as Nintendo gets their next Nintendo Direct, probably for a September drop here. So what do you guys think about Square Enix and what they've done here with the Nintendo Switch 2? Let me know in the comment section below. But before we get into the next topic, please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you are someone new, and click that notification bell to get my videos as soon as they drop. All right, let's get into the next topic here, and we're going to be evaluating some of the better Nintendo Switch 2 third-party games that have released. And I'm probably going to release a separate video kind of going over this at the end of the year. We'll go over the top 20 or top 25 or something like that third-party games like I've done before with the Nintendo Switch 1, but I can safely report here that the Nintendo Switch 2 has much better third-party support in the first number of months than the Nintendo Switch 1 ever could even dream about having, and the quality of those ports compared to what we got on the Nintendo Switch 1 is significantly better, and that's because Nintendo made a significantly better system, a significantly stronger system. It's got more modern features, more RAM, better everything overall when it comes to the innards of the platform, and you can see that in the ports. We recently got an update from Digital Foundry on Apex Legends on the Nintendo Switch 2. And if you compare that to the Switch 1, it's literally a blur filter on the Nintendo Switch 1. But on the Nintendo Switch 2, it's so much more crisp, it's so much more clean, and it looks like they're even using DLSS for their game, so that's pretty cool as well. And they even have it upwards of near the Xbox Series S level and actually outclassing it in some ways when it comes to image clarity and things. So that wasn't too surprising for me, at least, because I know what the Nintendo Switch 2 can do. But I think for a lot of people out there who were expecting a PS4-like experience that Digital Foundry told you guys about, it's obviously outclassing that with a game like Apex Legends. You also have a game like Cyberpunk 2077. We've talked about this game multiple times, but that was a tech showpiece for what the Nintendo Switch 2 can do as a dedicated hybrid platform running at a target 40 FPS and supporting quite a number of graphical features and things that you did not see on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One versions, and even just from what you can see, looking visually better than what we see on the Xbox Series S, and very close to PlayStation 5 when it comes to just the look of the game. And obviously not as good as PlayStation 5, but the fact that it's actually punching well above its weight considering the size of the system, it's just crazy to see that. So Cyberpunk 2077, definitely one of the better games. And then of course Street Fighter 6, that has been a game since the launch that has done really well too. That also outclasses the Xbox Series S and looks very close to the PlayStation 5. Now sometimes people get this idea that just because a game is 2D or just because it's a fighting game, it's not a massive open world game, that doesn't really take any type of power to run those games, or there's not really much going on under the hood of that. But that couldn't be further from the truth. There's a lot of effects, a lot of post-processing, a lot of things going on with Street Fighter 6. Go ahead and look at the PlayStation 4 version of that game and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Because if you compare that to the PS5 version or you compare that to the Nintendo Switch 2 version of the game, it definitely looks noticeably worse. Not bad at all, but definitely looking worse. So to me, games like Street Fighter 6, what they were able to do, how they pulled off DLSS and what they did as a port coming at the very beginning, not even using the full potential of the system, it's already exciting what we're seeing here. Now, there could be some concern when it comes to some of the more ambitious games, some Unreal Engine 5 titles that are coming over. How are those conversions going to be on the Nintendo Switch 2? But I think that if you look at the range, and I would say the type of flexibility that a lot of these engines have, I think that developing for a lower spec compared to the high-end PCs and all that is definitely feasible, because I feel that Nintendo gave them enough juice this time. Unlike the Nintendo Switch 1, where, yes, it was good for what it was, but at the time, the technology just was not there to get the type of games that you can see on PS4 and Xbox One and get them running and looking good and having battery life on the Nintendo Switch 1. It just wasn't there, or you're going to have a system that costs $1,000. Nintendo needed to make sure that this system was affordable, especially coming off the Wii U, which had a terrible overall lifespan. And of course, the Nintendo 3DS, which didn't have a great launch and was one of the lower selling Nintendo mainline portables. Nintendo Switch 2 hybrid system combines both, so they have to make sure that they do a number of different things to satisfy all different types of consumers with that, which there were some cutbacks. But with the Nintendo Switch 2, the investment is there, the technology caught up, they obviously have a great partner with NVIDIA, they've got DLSS, they've got far more experience now developing for a hybrid platform in HD games, and so do a lot of these other developers as well. I think that the Apex developers definitely, I would say, learned a lot from developing on the Nintendo Switch 1, so getting the Switch 2 version of the game down pat so quick is definitely good. Same thing with Cyberpunk, and obviously Capcom, they developed on the Switch 1, so they know what they're doing. So these developers were experienced. They put their games out on Switch 1. We saw The Witcher 3 on Switch 1, and yeah, it was a bit rough, but that experience was vital in terms of developing for a hybrid platform, and I think that it really helped them perfect what they needed to do with the Nintendo Switch 2 here in the first number of months. We're not even a year in, so that's what's exciting about this. There's still room to get better. There's still room for these games to improve overall, even with Nintendo's first-party games. Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza aren't using DLSS, and these three third-party games are using DLSS, so Nintendo can even improve when it comes down to what they're doing on the system. So that's what makes the Nintendo Switch 2 so exciting for specific third-party games. I'm not expecting it to be blowing it out of the water like PS5 Pro, that type of level or anything, but for people who want to be able to play their games anywhere that they want and don't necessarily care about having the highest end in terms of graphics, because I don't care about that 100%. Like if there's a certain game that I feel like I need that, then I have my PS5 Pro, I can get that. But for a lot of games, I'd love to be able to play the game anywhere that I want. I don't need everything when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2. I just need some good stuff along with Nintendo's incredible first-party games. So I think that we're off to a good start so far. But what do you guys think when it comes to what I had to say here about Square Enix and just to some of the third-party impressive ports so far, which there are more. I just named 3. There are some other games, but I just wanted to go over those. So what do you guys think about that? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 RPG content and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.